Welcome back. We're on page 156 talking about the project management plan. This is probably one of the most important plans. It's not short like the charter. It's going to be pretty good size. Okay, so there's some bullet lists. Let's just kind of go through the highlights of the bullet list here. So starting on page 156, they talk about the overview section and what it ought to have. It ought to have the name of your project. And by the way, again, just like the elevator pitch, these names ought to be kind of sexy names. And I don't mean that in a sexist way. What I mean, it has to be a name that kind of makes cool sense. Make up a cool acronym or something. It can't be the Accounts Receivable Improvement Project. Okay, well, that's not very interesting. You have to come up with a really cool name for these things in order to get them sold, so to speak. Anyway, the name, the description, the sponsor, the key members. What are the deliverables? What are you going to do? At the end of this project, we will have any reference material and any abbreviations and acronyms and things of that nature. So this is like the first page or so is going to be this kind of short thing. And then you're going to talk about the project organization. Typically, you would have like an org chart saying, okay, Bob's going to be the project manager, so Sue's going to be the sponsor, and we're going to have this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, boom, boom, just an organizational chart. Listing all their responsibilities, and if there's any other related organizations, particularly internal organizations that you're going to touch, you need to include that as well. Management and technical approach. Remember we talked about how some of these projects where you could have a mixture of technical and project where one person is actually working for two people, right? Remember that? Okay. So what kind of a management approach are you using? Are you going to borrow people and they're going to be only working for you? Or are you going to share them? Who controls the budget, which was a classic question on the previous time we talked about that. So what are the management objectives? Basically how we're going to do this. What kind of project controls are we going to put in place? Again, this is where you have the risk management pieces about, okay, what happens if, our key developer is gone? The staffing requirements and whatever technical process might be in place. If this is a software project, you might say, well, I'm using Agile or I'm not using Agile or whatever. The next section is the work that needs to be done. This is where you come up with those high-level work breakdown structures. And then where the key deliverables are, I'm going to go in and I'm going to do this, and this. So I'm going to have a deliverable here, here, and here. It could be just simple milestones saying, this part's going to be done then, this part's going to be done then, and any other work-related information. The next one is the schedule, very important. Hopefully this will be like on a Gantt chart, because you've already done the high-level WBSs. So there'll be some sort of a summary. Okay, the summary is going to say, well, this project's going to take 18 months to do, or something like that. And then you have a detailed schedule if you want to read the detailed schedule. Likewise with the budget. It's going to cost $1 million, and then that's the summary level one. And then after that, it's going to be the detail level one. Here's where the labor costs are, and here's where the, software licensing, and here's where the hardware, and blah, 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 blah. Okay. Now, thankfully, on page 161, they talk about using guidelines. Thankfully, there are companies that have these templates already built. And believe it or not, the IEEE people have one of these guys that are already been built. And so if you want, you don't have to build your own project management plan. You could instead just take one of theirs. So this is an entire document. This is the IEEE standard 1058. Actually, it's not 1058. It's been superseded, but it's the same thing. So here's the elements of their project management plan. You can get these things off the internet. You can get one in like a Word template, so to speak, that just fill in the blank. Start from the very beginning. The overview and references and definitions and the context and planning and assessment and controls and deliverables. And The idea is that you don't want to be spending a heck of a lot of time writing dang papers. You want to be after doing whatever it is you need to do. So project management plan template or guideline or whatever you want to call it is a very, very useful one. They talk about two different ones. A DoD standard 2167. Okay, I've seen that one. I have never used it. And the IEEE standard one, which is this one, and I've seen it too, and I've not personally ever used it. So the here is one of the things that they talk about. Here's this standard, the 1058. There's an overview section, and we just talked about this. The purpose, the scope, and objectives, and assumptions, and constraints, and all those kind of things. How you're going to be organized, both internally and externally, what the roles and responsibilities are, the managerial process. How are you going to staff up? Are you going to be hiring new people? Are you going to be borrowing people? How are you going to do this? You're going to train people up. What are the work plans? Are they going to sit at their desk? Are they going to move? The technical processes. What are we're going to use Visual Studio and we're going to use Agile method. What are the technical things you're going to do that? And whether or not you need some other, server or something that makes that work. Supporting process plans. These are, the other plans, the such and such plan, and the validation and documentation and quality assurance and reviews. Okay. So again, just to make things easy, you don't have to make these things up yourself. You could just go out and find somebody else who's got one and plagiarize it. Oh, I didn't say that out loud, did I? No, it's perfectly okay for you to go use one of these guidelines. That's what they're for. Okay. So continuing on page 162, they talk about directing and managing work. So now we've moved on from the planning process. Now we're directing it. And once again, this has an awful lot to do with management and supervision. So, coordinating the planning and execution, and some of these things I'm telling you are just incredibly obvious. You're probably groaning back there in the back. But these things just don't do things by themselves. Things just don't occur by themselves. It takes somebody to manage things. You have to assign a task, and you have to verify that it gets done. That's just management. We could have an entire discussion about the difference between management and supervision, but again, this is not a business course, so I won't. All right. The idea is that you need a system that can, as a good manager, you ought to be able to sound the alarm when things go wrong. You got to be able to say, whoa, we have a very poor plan here. We need to stop and fix this. Or it turns out that we thought we were doing this, and now it turns out we need to do that. So we need to stop and regroup and do something else. You need to be able to sound the alarm. And like in the case study, there was none of that. None of those things ever made it up to management. Okay, so they talk about providing strong leadership in a supportive culture. Okay, again, this is the management versus supervision. You're not cracking the whip. You're trying to, push versus pull. A supervisor is, trying to push people, or, I got that right. Anyway, the idea is that a supportive culture, you could be one of those scenarios where there's so many rules and so many policies and so many regulations that it really hampers you getting work done, or so much reporting requirements that the project manager spends 50% of their time, doing daily and weekly reports. But that it really ought to be the vast majority of their time is managing the work, right? Not doing stupid reports. And one of the key decisions, if you want to find out if you're in an organization that is too restrictive, just ask a simple question: how long does it take to get a decision? Can you just walk into the boss's office and say, boss, I think we need a new SQL server. Is that okay? And they go, well, how much does it cost? You go, I don't know, about $5,000. They said, yeah, go for it. And poof, you're done. Or do I have to fill out a form in triplicate and get it signed by this person and this person and this person? Then it ships off. And then you have to have a meeting to discuss it. And then maybe 3 weeks later, they come back and tell you. So how long does it take to get a decision? Yeah, that'll tell you your work environment. The next thing they talk about is capitalizing on product, business, application, area knowledge. You may have some folks in your team that are absolutely brilliant, and you probably need to rely on those guys. So if you're in a small team, you could probably get away with having some very technical kind of managerial things. You could be directing the traffic, so to speak. You could be going in there and saying, I don't think that part right there is right. You need to fix this, that kind of thing. If you're on a big team, you're not going to be able to get down into the weeds. You're not going to be able to, you're going to be doing, instead of having technical competence, you're going to need that business and what they call application, which is kind of poor choice of words, but business competence. So back to the case study, the guy who was previously the team developer, he had excellent top of the line technical skills, but he didn't have any business skills at all. Okay, cool. Anyway, the point of that whole story is you may have people in your organization that are really great at something, but you don't know anything about it. Let me give you another crazy example. All right, I'm putting together a flyer, and I was, I put together, it's something simple like in PowerPoint. I'm going to be sticking it on bulletin boards, and somebody says, "Hey, you need to get old Bob down there in the carpenter shop to draw a little figure." I go, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, didn't you know he was a fantastic artist?" And I'll go, "No." He goes, "Yeah, he does cartoons and all this stuff all the time. He'd love to do that." And I go, "A carpenter?" They go, "Yeah." Okay, so I go find Bob and say, "Hey, I understand you draw cool little cartoons." He goes, "Yeah, what do you have in mind?" And poof, I get up with this absolutely gorgeous symbol that I use in my thing. But the point of the story is, how the hell would I know that Bob was a good artist? You're going to have to ask around. You may have some expertise out there that you have no knowledge of. I would have gone out and contracted for somebody because I didn't know that we had somebody there all like that. Okay, let me continue. The project execution tools and techniques, that's the next section. This is where, expert judgment is where it comes in. This is where you have meetings. Oh God, I hate meetings. I've almost thought about striking that, not talking about it. But yeah, this is where you get people together and say, okay, we need to solve this problem. Management information system. Most likely, if you're a decent-sized company, you already have an MIS system, a system that you can query and say, for example, how long does it take us to get parts? And so you do a little query. This is, wow, the average time it takes for a parts supply order to return is 7 days. That kind of information might be available to you depending on what your project is, right? Okay. So the next thing they talk about is monitoring and controlling. So now that we're done with supervision and management, now we're in monitoring and controlling. And one more time, you remember that monitoring and controlling is not in line with these other steps. They don't just, it's not a waterfall, okay? Monitoring and controlling is monitoring and controlling all things. So monitoring and controlling kicks in almost immediately. So one more time, 90% of the job of the project manager is good communication. Communication up, communication down, keeping everybody on track. That's really what it's all about. So monitoring and controlling kind of basically has two major functions here. One is things like maintaining the schedule and the budget. Here is our budget. Here is our schedule. So tracking where we go to do that. The other are things like validating changes that come up and assessing work performance. Those are kind of different. So one is, remember we talked about the Gantt chart. One is you go in and you establish the baseline, and so you start tracking. I said it was going to take 6 months, but as we're going now, it looks like we're going to be over. It's going to take us 7 months instead. So that Gantt chart can help you with that. So establishing that baseline. And then sometimes, in some scenarios, you're not allowed to deviate from the baseline without some sort of an approval. So your organization may say, anytime you exceed a project baseline or budget by more than 5%, whatever that number is, then you need to come ask management for approval. Those are good ways to keep cost overruns from absolutely being a surprise at the end of the project. Okay, this is a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark. We'll finish this thing up in just a few.